Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Hines, disability attorney, here with another episode of the Good Fight podcast. And I'm thrilled to have with me today. This is the Garmy edition of the Good Fight. We have Ali Garmey-Chardon and Chris Harmon, both from Garmey-Law here in Portland, Maine. And I thought it might be interesting if they're up for it, rather than having me read their bio, if they might introduce one another. Who'd like to go first?
I can tackle that, Jason. Let me tell you a little bit about the person I'm really honored to call my partner. Um, Her father rescued me from not knowing what I was going to really do with my life or legal career and adopted me, I think, over 12 years ago. And I think maybe about 6 years ago, when I had a deposition out in Chicago, I I got to spend some time with his wonderful daughter, Allie, who I've met on a couple of different occasions. And Allie, no surprise, brilliant like her father, Terry Garmy. But her mom, her mom is a nurse too, and she really combines that passion and that empathy that goes into what she does. And she's got the best of all. To me, she's She-Hulk though, because she attacks every claim, and I wouldn't want to be on the other side of her like that. So we adopted Allie into the firm. She started out in BigLaw. She was I think almost a perfect score on her LSAT, I want to say, and went to Northwestern here and started out in BigLaw. Realized heart wasn't in it, and that there was a right thing to do. And I think it makes sense. She probably wanted to separate herself from her father, have her own entity, but when she realized she didn't join here because of him, she really joined this firm because this is the right thing to do and to help people, and that's where her passion was. And I'm really honored to call her my partner, not only in a law firm, but my trial partner. Tried some really good cases with her, and happy to have her by my side.
Amazing. So, okay, that was a couple of things I noticed there. Ali, that's that's a tough act to follow, but I guess as the She-Hulk with a perfect LSAT score, you're probably ready for it. Maybe more importantly, I think that may be the longest time I've heard Chris speak without you interrupting him. So let's.
Wow.
Well, Jason, it was a very worthy subject. So
Right, right.
for once, I had to bite my tongue. Jason, first, thanks for having us and for giving us the honor of being on a podcast called The Good Fight. We do this work for that reason. Nobody embodies. That's not a word. Embodies that better. See, perfect. I was going to say, Chris, that perfect L score, that's like the time Derry Runlin announced our verdict as multiple $1 million. Highest premises verdict in the state. So if Chris says it's true. Chris embodies the good fight. He has built. I admire him for having built a plaintiff's practice and a reputation the old-fashioned way by helping people day in and day out on little cases and big cases. And when he started out, lots of little cases in those, because he serves people, because he thinks of them first and what's best for them, and he fights really hard on the little cases. He got more and more big cases, and people kept coming back and talking about him. And now he has this beautiful practice. And I think it's probably fair to say that every plaintiff's lawyer in the state is jealous of my partners and I, because we have a Chris Harmon. I mean, this man he carries a ton of cases, and he succeeds in a ton of cases, and he tries a ton of cases. And once you know sort of the inside of this business, and how hard it is to just keep the lights on while you're running your bigger cases that cost a lot of money, then you know how valuable it is to have a Chris Harmon. So not only that, because he carries a lot of cases, he's got cases that are coming up onto the docket despite our clogged court system. And when I moved back from Chicago in 2020, I was way behind, right, getting my own cases to trial. So Chris kindly let me jump aboard and try those cases with him. And we do not always get along, and we know how to not get along and how to disagree with one another. And we've had, I will tell, let's not talk about them on this podcast, but we've had fights, as we're prepping for trial, and disagreement about how cases should settle or not settle. And and whether or not something is a good case to take on in the first place. And I am so grateful that I have a partner that I can have a good old-fashioned disagreement with and still have so much mutual respect. He's an animal. This guy tries cases and he wins them, and he wins the hard ones, and he isn't afraid to lose them. And at the end of the day, that's what gets the better result for all of our clients, because insurance companies know that we're not going to give up just because it's a tough case. Like, if we're going to lose it, but our client needs it to be tried and there's no better option, we'll try it. And that reputation we've always worked to keep at this law firm. But I think Chris is really, really been instrumental in not just maintaining the reputation that my dad had built, but really growing it. And by the way, so it's interesting that you're calling it the Garmy edition, and when sometimes I forget that my middle name is on the door here. I people who aren't from Maine and don't know this practice think that I moved back to take over my dad's law firm. Anyone who knows, who's part of the bar here, knows I came back to be part of the firm that he built and my partners grew. And they really welcomed me into it. I want to make that clear. And I feel really grateful. I feel so grateful that I had sort of an in to come back and practice in Maine and do this work, because there's a reason why so many people want to practice here. It's a great place to practice, just like it's a great place to live. So anyway, thanks, Chris, for hiring me. And
Well, so it's really interesting, Chris, because you started off saying that that Terry, I don't know if I thought you used the word that Terry sort of adopted you, but then you were adopting then Allie, and so it's interesting to get that to get the She-Hulk's origin story. Yeah, that's really cool.
Been great. Thank you for the kind words, Al.
This is, and also, by the way, I think you guys pointed out a new dimension of the name, that we could, have that be a good fight could also just be a place where partners could come on and fight with one another. I mean, I think that still fits within the purview of the show. So
that stuff happens behind closed doors, my friend. I don't think you'd have a lot of takers on that one.
Okay.
But it is a really important point that Allie addressed too, that it's just like when someone's calling us for the first time, they're at a very low point, there's high stress, they have to do 8 million things. That can really be what goes on right at the heels of a trial, right on the eve of it. And you do have disagreements, so it's really great if you have someone, like our partnership, where we can disagree, we can talk about it, feelings aren't hurt, there are growing pains to get there. But it's really wonderful when you do have people you can throw ideas off of. You don't always agree, but your hearts are in the right place and you want to get your minds there too.
Well said. Well said. Well, I shared some questions with you guys, and in terms of what you both said, I'm really interested, Chris, when you were talking about, what do you say, 12 years ago, Terry sort of helped you figure out what you wanted to do. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it was a group effort. Terry was certainly involved in it. So, I grew up in a project in Portland, Maine called Riverton Park here. My parents didn't have health insurance. My older brother was diabetic. My parents didn't believe in college. So 4 days into my dad's senior year of high school, he got in a car wreck and broke his neck. So his parents didn't have a FAFSA. He started college, but then got thrown out because he couldn't afford it. My mom dropped out of high school because her dad had a back injury, and she had to take care of her 4 siblings and mom. So I didn't realize it'd be hard to talk about. But so our little family sort of grew in from that. So my parents didn't go back to college until I was 4, and I had 2 older siblings too. So they worked and they worked. And and they really did the best they could. So, I wanted to work too, and growing up on that sort of side, I kind of saw how people were marginalized, not taken very seriously. and they have complaints, and people just sort of write them off. Oh, you're poor, you must have, alcohol or drug addiction problems and things like that. And there was really a lack of a voice, and I noticed that. So that's always sort of stayed with me, to see people for who they are, not, necessarily their appearance, and not where they're from. And I didn't really realize how much of a part of my life that would become, but I wanted to work hard. Like, my parents always had 3 jobs each, and they got their college degrees, and I wanted to get my college degree and go to law school to help people, And my first year in law school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I enjoyed presenting, and I knew I really liked people and cared about them, and I really liked torts, personal injury. And I got a job with a solo practitioner who I think was just always very stressed, didn't really have time, wasn't a great teacher, very short tempered, very short temper, and it just wasn't for me, and I couldn't do it. And I said, I've been a bartender, I was, always social in college and things like that. I thought about being a real estate agent. I could do something else. I don't need to be a lawyer. So I called my torts professor at the law school, Maine Law here, Jenny Riggins. And I said, hey, I don't know what to do. I don't want to burn a bridge, but I've only been here for 7 days and I can't do it anymore. I want to just quit. She said, well, why don't you come work for me? And so I left that job. It's the only time in my life that I've ever quit without a 7 days notice or a 2 weeks notice. I just called the guy, quit on the spot, started working with my torts professor there. And shortly therein, I was a good law student, really excelled in torts on that. And, I eventually was on the bar journal and everything. But she said, I know a guy, not an asshole, who's looking for trial lawyers. His name's Gary Goldberg. And Gary brought up the firm Berman and Simmons. It was Berman and Simmons and Goldberg. Jack hired Gary. Gary made the firm really. It was a big part about making the firm what it is. And Gary was a top trial lawyer in Maine. Terry was a top trial lawyer in Maine. Gary stopped practicing for years due to a medical issue. Started coming back into the firm, into the fold, maybe 2010-ish or so, around that time when I was working with Professor Riggins. And Terry said, hey, I want you to come back. And Gary said, I'm doing mediations. And Terry said, no, I want you to come back. And then they created this with David Chrysler, Garmey-Law, or Terry Garmey and Associates. And Gary gave me a shot, and that summer, and I've been here ever since. So Terry and Gary together, and David. So very grateful for that. It's a long-winded story. I apologize.
Not at all. No, it's one that I'm that I'm really glad and really honored to hear, frankly. Particularly in terms of what you mentioned with how some of this inclination started with your family circumstances. That's really, thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I think it really shapes who Chris is. That was, thank you, Chris. I think what you just saw, that genuine emotion, he's actually usually quite tough and funny about joking about the projects. But that, my best guess is that came on because Chris doesn't do a lot of thinking about himself these days, and he just had a minute to do it. So anyway, I appreciate that, Chris. On my end, it's something I'm very proud of, that Chris and basically every attorney in this law firm other than me came up as came up poor, not truly poor, but came up and had to make his or her own way. And I really think that those backgrounds are typically, you see those a lot in really great plaintiff trial attorneys, because our hardships make us sensitive, make us human, make us want to fight the right side of justice. And my father, his parents, he was the first to go to college in his house. His father didn't ever graduate high school, and that he always carried shame and a chip on his shoulder about it. And I think that it's a good chip. Gary Goldberg's father was a mover in New York City. That breeds hard workers for sure. in our case and the people who work here, I admire my dad so much for what he's done in his career. And, he had started this law firm, but he had just the good sense of who he wanted to work with and who he wanted to work for, right? And it's only recently that Chris and me and Peter and David, our two law partners, have taken over the law firm and become the partners for a long time. You know, the team, it took a while to get there, but that team that he built along with David and Gary is pretty special. So I'm glad to be a part of it, and I hope that I deserve to be a part of it, right? So my dad, like, he worked his butt off when I was growing up, but I didn't know that as much. I knew he loved his job, but my mother, who was around and providing all the stuff on the peripheries that's necessary to make a kid have a stable, happy life, made it look like my dad, was around all the time. Because I remember, having dinner, hearing funny and sad war stories, um, wrestling when we were little or doing homework when we were older, coaching mock trial, doing all these things for us, taking us out on the boat on the weekends on whatever boat he could afford. And we weren't, we certainly weren't rich compared to the standards of, what people, some of the attorneys my dad knows from other states. But we were, we were really comfortable, and I had a really good life, and I had a promise that if I worked really hard, um, whatever college I got into, my parents would help me pay for. And took me a long time to understand how lucky I was. I guess I'm answering your question without, about how we got here um, in my own way. And it's funny because my version of the trials that made me is like the most privileged version in the world. I went to a fancy law school, got a fancy degree. I went to a fancy clerkship, that part I will never, ever regret. And I got money dumped on my head to go work for big corporations on the defense side. And it was really, um, I wasn't grown up enough to understand that that's just every pore in my body didn't want to do that. On the other hand, I was responsible enough. My parents also made another deal, which I also am grateful they did. We had to pay for our own grad school. Um, and so I had loans, and I had reality, and I had a husband getting a PhD, and pretty soon I had 2 kids, and I had to, you know, support a family in a city, and I found myself trapped in golden handcuffs in a job I really didn't suit me at all. It wasn't work I wanted to do, and none of the wonderful people at my law firm, as wonderful as they were, I didn't want their job. So after 6 or 7 years of that, I felt so trapped. I recognized that I was finally mature enough to understand that I did want to do what my dad did, even if everybody at my fancy law school thought it was ambulance chasers. That my dad was the only happy lawyer I really knew. That how much I'd been molded by all these stories around the dinner table about his clients. He loves his clients, and he talks about them and their stories, and then and how satisfied he was that he had been able to help all these people make it in life, become successful, and as he puts it, steal from the rich, give to the poor, and keep just enough for Robin and the merry men. Well, I was the merry men, right? And so, anyway, after 6 or 7 years of being really, truly empty, feeling empty professionally, and thinking I didn't want to be a lawyer, I found a way to make it to the plaintiff's bar. And it was not easy because my skills were not, I didn't have experience on the kind of cases that we do, right? I didn't have on my feet experience. I didn't have enough deposition experience. I didn't have enough, trial experience. I had big, fancy, briefing experience and class action defense strategy experience and internal corporate advising on, fiduciary duties of the board. But it was very different. So anyway, so that is at that point. I can tell you, it took me a little bit. I did some work. I did work in Chicago first, but eventually I was able to kind of take enough cases with my dad, and then eventually growing with this practice and working with Chris and Gary and all these other people that were working here, and realizing that this this was an opportunity. If I didn't come back to Maine now and work with this group and take this job with, yeah, it's my dad's firm. Like, I got an in, take it. I was old enough at that point to say, what am I doing? Like, you know,
Hmm.
it's like I was a furniture salesman and trying to make it my own way out in Chicago, and my family had a big business out here in Maine. It's like, what more? It was just, how much longer do I want to hit my head against the wall? This works hard enough. So anyway, my difficulty that made me was cushiness. Isn't that ironic? It was being so unhappy doing the cushy thing that I realized that the risk and the work and the heartbreak of being a plaintiff's lawyer was worth it. And my God, I love my job now. I never thought I would love my job so much. It's just great. Even the bad parts, even working with Chris Harmon, I can put up with because I get to this job is so wonderful. But I don't think I'd ever have that joy if I hadn't really been in the wrong place and felt trapped.
That is really, yeah, it's sort of, you seems like you have to experience that other side to really appreciate what you have now. I mean, this is a question that comes up over and over again for me, that because I was always, I practiced the disability law, which is notionally or nominally non-adversarial, right? Like, there isn't opposing counsel. Sometimes the judges feel like opposing counsel. But when you mentioned about the difficulty of the job, I think that's something it's part of the reason why I love talking to lawyers like you guys, is figuring out, how is it that something that's so stressful, how do you love it so much when it's so stressful, so demanding, managing all the cases and then going to trial? Tell me about that.
Well, first of all, the highs are pretty high, and then, of course, makes the lows lower, but you get to ride. There's some momentum there.
Okay.
Um, I will say the work is a lot more fun. Taking depositions and standing up in court is a lot more fun than doing privilege logs and document reviews and writing briefs with a bunch of other white shoe attorneys. So that helps. And the clients are regular people. That's a lot easier. You know what? I don't mean to dismiss what defense attorneys do, because for some people love it, and and by the way, the firm I work for, I couldn't be more proud of them, and they actually love their work. They are super smart people. And they just filed they wrote several of the amicus briefs um, that have supported Perkins Coie and Wilmer Hale and all of these other law firms. So I'm extraordinarily proud of them and the work they do. I don't mean to diminish it. But for those attorneys, and there are many of them who are on the defense side, who don't like what they're doing because it's not fulfilling, and they feel like they can't complain because they understand they're good people. They understand they're getting paid a lot of money. That's also like not a happy place to be. So, and having the it takes risk tolerance to, I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question, but it's a luxury to be able to eat what you kill, because that means there's going to be uh, times of fasting, right? And you need to be, and not everybody can tolerate that risk for fair reasons, right? They may have college loans that come due every month.
My reaction to it, as you asked, is essentially, tell us what makes it worth it, right?
Yeah.
How do you get through it? Why do you do what you do when it's so hard? And I mean, I can just tell you, it feels right to try to do the right thing to help people, and we're doing that. We're doing it for money most of the time, but there certainly come a lot of times that you need to reduce your fee. Certain circumstances just waived entirely, but we actually don't put our fees first. We really put trying to help people first, and then things happen sort of organically on their own where we get paid from it. It's like Ali said about Robin Hood. And knowing that you're the focus, that you're the person that's going to get this person across the finish line to get what they need is very motivational. You know, you go trying to help another human being. They're in a really difficult part in their life. They want someone who's, first of all, just going to listen to them. A lot of folks can't even get attorneys on the phone. Everyone's so overworked and has such big caseloads. They want to keep their door open. We get it. It is stressful. But if you can find that time and that courage and strength to speak to these people, to hear what they have to say and fight for them, you know, to be their champion, sort of. I mean, that is very rewarding work. And, you know, Ali said, you know, we bring these cases to trial. We fight like hell. And sometimes we lose. But, you know, even when we do, our client looks at us and sees the amount of work that we put into helping them, that we've gone completely all out. And those are some of the clients who are the happiest of our services, because they see just what we've done for them. And that really that gets you up in the morning to get your run or your workout in, or your meditation, to get out and work hard another day.
And it also helps you sleep at night. So I will say that I am constantly glad that I work here, because we don't look. When I was in law school, and certainly for several years after, I had a chip on my shoulder, even after I became a plaintiff's lawyer, about small cases, about, you know, falls on ice at the mobile home park, and, you know, whiplash, rear end injuries, because they didn't seem sexy and they didn't seem like what great lawyers do. And I am so glad to be rid of that baggage. The way I think about our practice now, because I've seen, you know, I've seen the way Terry and Gary and Chris have built practices, and Peter Richard is on, you know, our other part is on turbo drive doing that as well. You just view it as a service. My job and my law license gives me the ability and the obligation to help shepherd people through this process, and advocate for their rights. Nobody else can do that, right? And they need it, and I get to get paid. Sometimes I get to hit it big, which is also fun. Let's not lie, that knowing that sometimes, for all the fees we waive and lose, you know, sometimes we might hit it big. That's fun. That's, you know, the lottery.
Absolutely.
That's fun. But just the notion that we're service, that we actually, it's like we provide a service, and we don't need to think that hard about how much profit margin we're going to make on each case, and we don't. There's a lot of cases that I settle that are, you know, just not a ton of money, but they, you know, they paid somebody's salary for the month, or they, you know, paid the electrical bill for the month for our firm, and we kept going and we kept fighting, and we got the chance to land a big fish that's going to, you know, beat a lottery or whatever. Not having to worry about whether or not my time is perfectly well spent and perfectly well compensated for that hour I just spent working to get somebody's health bill protected, so she doesn't have health insurance and she can get physical therapy for her injury, you know, is like, it's so nice not to have to nickel and dime myself, right? And that is the culture of this firm. And we're not that greedy, but it's like, we get to keep the lights on by doing that, and then those people come back to us, right? Or talk about us, and it's nice. In terms of clients that have stuck with me, I think for all of us, it's often kids. If you represent a kid and you do something right by a kid and you really make a difference, it's hard. It's really, you know, we're behind all of our clients, but it is really satisfying to get to fight for kids. I don't know, maybe it's just me as a mom, but I don't think I'm alone. I think that Chris would agree. And I have just, you know, I have a couple memories. One is representing a little boy who was physically abused by his mom's boyfriend, and his mom had no idea.
Mm.
And his mom kept bringing her son. She was very young, but she kept bringing her son to the doctor and saying, this is weird. Why does he have a swollen ankle? Why does he have bruises on both of his ears? And she would actually bring him to the doctor. And they put on you know, turns out ear bruising and this on a kid who's not walking, and especially bilateral ear bruising, is a red flag for child abuse. It's taught in It's
Mm.
101.
It's just awful.
And on that day, they put child abuse on a differential diagnosis, and they didn't tell the mom. And she had no opportunity to figure this out because of that, because the abuser is clearly a psychopath and hid it so well. Until the day that he went over the line and almost killed the child, throwing him against a bathtub. And so the child is disabled from that. He lived. But my father took a look at that suit and said, this is a hard one. This is medical malpractice for failure to diagnose child abuse. But how can that not be a doctor's duty? And he, from the beginning, believed in that case. And he was right. It is a case. And it was novel and it was different. But we succeeded. And we had every provider in the case that we deposed admitting that the standard of care would be to put child abuse on the differential at this visit and that visit and that visit, and it should have been communicated with the mom. So what was the defense? This reminds me of what Chris was saying about not being listened to. The defense was, Mom knew about this. Mom let this happen. Now Mom just wants money for his care. Because Mom was young, because Mom didn't have a college degree, perhaps, because this reason and that reason, because Mom was abused herself, God bless that brave mom who said, this is not about me. This is about my son. Here's my cell phone. Here's my Facebook. Here's my life. Open it up. Have everything you want. And they looked for anything they could throw at her to show that she should have known about this abuse or consented to this abuse. And it wasn't there. So end of the day, we got a very, very favorable settlement for this young boy, which is public actually, because it's against the federal government. And so it had to be public. It was a federally funded healthcare provider. So that meant that I got one of the largest settlements, medical malpractice settlements in the country that year. Why? Because medical malpractice settlements are always confidential, and this one wasn't. But on the way to Chris and my last trial in Bangor, Teresa McGowan's trial, I stopped at particularly my favorite Irving in Augusta, where I just know it well because I stopped there on the way to Rangeley all the time. And we were, having those pretrial jitters, my dad, my mentor, the guy I think is the best lawyer in the world, was telling me, you guys, this is a tough case. I don't know if you're going to win this, blah, 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 blah. I had told Chris, and I will say this, I'm proud of this because I'm proud of Chris. I had told Chris, don't touch this case with a 10-foot pole when it came in. Simply because I didn't listen. I don't think I listened to the client well enough because I had prejudice because she fired another attorney. And I will admit that. And I think that, I hope that if she were listening, she would know that I changed my tune, that I believed in her deeply, but she deserves to know that it's Chris that gave her that opportunity and gave me that opportunity. But anyway, on the way up to that trial that we thought was going to be tough to win, and it was tough to win, but we mopped the floor on it. I stopped for gas, and who says hello to me but the mom of this little boy? And she was stopped there with her husband, who's lovely. And she brought me out, and I got to see their handicapped accessible van. And my little client inside was his baby sister waving to me, hello. Set up. His life is very as comfortable as it can be now because he has a special needs trust that will fund all of the therapy he could ever need, that will make sure that he gets the 24-hour care, not from exhausted family members, or if it is family members and he does have a loving family and a lot of it, that they get paid to do that because it's, and there was just a lot of smiles, a lot of happiness. My client was doing better than we might have even expected. And that was just got in the car and said, win, lose, or draw. This is why this is worth it. And then of course we went and we won the next trial and made a huge difference for a woman who is incredible. And poured her affection out on Facebook every way she could. And it meant so much to us. It meant so much to us. So anyway, that one will stick with me always. And it was just I felt really lucky that I bumped into them on the way up to a trial.
I will say the only thing I disagree with is the downplay of that settlement and the achievement that they got. 8.2?
Yeah, it was around 8 million. Yeah.
$8.2 million is my memory on that. And to see that family at that rest stop was incredible. To see their admiration and just appreciation for everything that Allie and Terry did in that it's really why we do what we do.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, the government had said to us, you can't ask the court to dismiss the claim entirely and saying it's not a claim. And they were going to say that up until the end. I commend the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Maine. They are extraordinarily good. Everybody, all the lawyers are good in Maine. It's the name of, but they understood that this was a serious risk of a case, and they had to advocate very hard at the end of the day to get to the settlement. So did the judge that was mediating the case. I mean, everybody, once we got through the hard legal issues and then we took the depositions, and the doctors were straightforward and honest and made the case for us. So anyway, that was not an easy case, and we were told, we couldn't win it. And other children have been shut out from the courts in other jurisdictions and under somewhat similar circumstances. So anyway, it felt really good. And that's the kind of thing I will say that sort of that fancy pants briefing, writing experience, I like to think does help me somewhere. If for no other reason than I wouldn't necessarily have the confidence on my own to be like, I'm as smart as these people, but I can do this. But maybe it helps somewhere go, I can do this.
Yeah, I'm really just impressed by your willingness to disclose that you thought it was not a case you should take on, and that and that sort of sharing of credit. It's really, and I see, I was joking before when we started about how, like, you let Chris speak without interrupting him, and you guys kind of trade these jabs, but seeing the way that you're so humble and the way that you share credit with one another, and I think are cheerleaders for one another. It's really special to observe. It's really cool. I wish I was practicing with you guys.
Yeah, we're lucky. It is like a family. Having a law partnership is like a family. It can be extraordinarily painful. I've seen law firms break up, and it's tough. So, hey, we are super lucky. I mean, just having trust is everything. I've never really been in an environment like this where I really feel like I get to be just who I am, and I'm a woman, and I have a different perspective because of that. And it is like not the fact that I am a woman is like just not a big deal, right? Not a deal at all, except to the extent that people are like my partners are absolutely willing to listen to the perspective that I bring because of that. And I don't know how to the way that we all share affection around here is basically the way I was brought up, which is you tease people. And I know that being the only, woman partner is a non-issue because of the way that I get teased about it. And I freaking love that. Like at the last partner meeting, I show up and Chris says to David, "What? I told you no women in here." It was so funny. It was hilarious. It was just funny. And then I disagreed. We were having a contentious issue, trying to sort it out. And that's another great thing about working here is we just sit in a room and pick each other's brains or go bother each other a lot. And we were doing that. And I was worked up and I thought that Gary was really wrong. And I was annoyed at the situation and I was full of righteous indignation. And then I left and I was like, I was an asshole. I was a really big
I
jerk. I
remember
was
that.
a jerk to Gary. I was dismissive. Because I'm not used to just being like aggressive and saying my point of view and not thinking about how it's being perceived. And I hadn't been thinking about how it was perceived. So I left and I was like, oh shit, I was a jerk. So I went back in and I was like, and then the fact that I could do this and they didn't say like, call the loony bin. Went back in the other alley. And I was like, was I a jerk, you guys? They were like, Allie, I have no idea what you're talking about. Go away. And I was like, okay, good. There we go. Like all of it, the full circle of being able to have my, imposter monster paranoia fully exposed and also having an opportunity to just speak my mind and having even one moment where I'm not worried about what other people are thinking about it. That to me means that I'm in a good spot. I'm a really lucky woman attorney.
Yeah, I think that's 100%. I agree with everything Allie said. We come from a foundation of we don't care who you are, what your gender is, anything. I mean, if you're here, we know that you can do what you need to do to succeed, which means you're working 3 times harder than the next person. But we're going to make that work, and we do burn off some stress with some humor just to get through it all. But there's always a mutual respect and trust on it. We're a dysfunctional family, but we're a family.
It's true. I will share that in some of those fights that we've had I will call them fights leading up to trial.
Yeah.
We had to debrief them, Chris and I, and we talked about how we speak different languages. I think we speak different languages when we're angry, and I can't read Chris. And to me, Chris, I interpreted the way he was saying things and how he was saying it one way. And after a couple days, I told him all that, and he told me how he interpreted what I was saying and all that. And that, I'm glad we did that. And now there's a shorthand for it. It's a lot easier if he does that. I still think he looks condescending and like he thinks I'm a stupid idiot. And I'll just say, well, you seem like you're condescending and think I'm a stupid idiot. So I'll see you later. Okay, cool. I could do the shorthand part because we did the talky stuff and we, but it's not supposed to be always easy, and it's not. So if you have, I guess underlying trust and commitment, right? And I think knowing each other, knowing that you're each working really hard for a common goal and seeing how hard each other works is also critical, right? To just the trust and like, whatever, we're both in it to win it. Let's give this a second shot. Talking about
Yeah,
that.
like when we try a case and we divide labor, I don't say, Ellie, give me your opening from beginning to end, and I want to see what I can add, and I can take that. It's like, you're doing that, I trust you. If I open a case, she says, you're opening, I trust you. We can talk about some themes in the trial that's important, but we don't say. She doesn't say, Chris, give me your 16 points that you're going to really try to hammer on with the examination of this witness. It's like, you take that witness, I take this witness, you take the closing in this trial, I'll take the closing. I took the closing in the last one. Let's put our themes together. Let's talk about it before we do things to make sure we're generally on the same page. But no one's micromanaging, and that's really I can't tell you what a relief that is, to just have someone that you trust, that you try the case with, you rely on, you trust their judgment. At the end of the day, you trust their judgment, and then you trust the jury. And it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because there's that trust in one another to, hey, if you pass, if you divide work, you have that confidence in the other person to do it, which I think is an enormously important and beneficial kind of trust. But I think I'm even more impressed by the trust that you guys were describing in terms of being oneself And
Yeah.
sometimes, it's particularly when you're in these tough situations,
Oh yeah.
we're not always our best selves, and yet to trust one another I don't know, to trust one another with these personal, with these personal failings or things that we're not proud of, and yet you trust one another and you forgive one another and you move on for the good of the client and the good of the firm. That to me, that seems really unusual.
Yeah, I think I think it is unusual. I have been in a lot of contexts and had a lot of different jobs. And one of my Achilles heels is that I can become obsessed with my Achilles heels and talk about them, that I can be too much of an open book about my faults and what bothers me. Um, and I can harm myself that way. I'm not alone in this. There's a lot of, I think in particular, a lot of women, I don't know, I just can't shut up about my faults sometimes. Um, and part of that is working, I'm learning not to do it as much because it's partly trying to work through my anxiety and fishing for people around me to make me feel better. And, it's just not healthy. And I've moved beyond it somewhat, I hope. But at the end of the day, you know, I do feel safe enough in this, with my colleagues that I can talk about my vulnerabilities for the purposes, and they know I want them to tell me, shut up, Allie. Don't talk that way. As Chris would say, don't talk that way about my She-Hulk. Like,
Really.
and that being able to I don't think that he's going to stick in his brag. You know what? I am confident that he's confident in me, right? I know that he's, and that means a lot. That means a lot.
That Yeah, I think as somebody who also struggles with those, maybe dwelling on the Achilles heel, or
Yeah.
having someone that you can who can remind you not to badmouth the She-Hulk.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And
that's
by you, and
that's
by
so
you.
important.
1 second. This is my new prize. This is my first edition collector's item.
Oh wow,
How do I get it focused? I gotta
there she is.
unblur. Just put it where my face is. I'm She-Hulk. Anyway, I got a first edition. 1979, 1st of February. I just ordered a frame for it, my friend.
Amazing.
Yeah, so he bought that for me. It showed up yesterday.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys are my heroes, and I think more importantly, you're heroes to your clients. I know you guys both have calls here in a few minutes, so we can. I think this is a great place to conclude things for now. This is only volume 1 of the Garmy edition. So, would love to chat with you guys again, but it's just been. I mean, I can't think of a better way to spend an hour than talking with and learning from you guys. So thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah. And
Thank
thanks
you,
for having
Jason.
this. Yeah. I mean, and thanks for doing this podcast in general, because I think it could be really helpful for other people to see, it's not just me, or it's not just my law firm. How do they do it? So that's a really big tool that you're providing for everyone in the community.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
And I hope this convinces you, because I always try to tell you, no, I actually I want to just talk to you about claim data because this is really, really helpful to us and it's changing our practice. But I will actually talk to you without pastries and coffee. And I hope this proves that. See?
Okay,
See?
good.
But
Good. Wow.
I'm on the fence.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
yeah,
Fair enough.
well, yeah. See how this settles after we hang up. All right. Take care, everybody. Good to see you, Jason.
Wonderful to see you guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
Jason. Thanks,
guys.
She-Hulk.
All right. Bye bye, guys.